what it was that started those dominoes toppling to lead you out of being a believer into becoming an atheist and activist of whatever type you are.
Oh, sure. Well, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
I think my story's a little bit different from some of the stories you normally hear, in as much as I didn't start off as a believer. Like, I wasn't brought up in religion. I was actually brought up in a secular household.
Right.
My mother was an atheist. My father was a lapsed Calvinist Christian. He was like in the Dutch Reformed Church, but he long since gave up believing by the time I was born. He did come back into it at the end of his life, but
oh, really?
Yeah, right towards the end.
Did he say why he ended up going back to it?
Not to me. I didn't really ask, but I think it was more a community thing than it was anything else. He was living further away from us by that stage, and like, he was living in. I live in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, and he was living in Toowoomba by that time, which is about a 2-hour drive away.
Okay.
So I think it was a community thing for him to a lesser or greater degree. But anyway, okay. I grew up in a household that didn't have religion. I didn't go to church. I think the first time I ever went to a church was when I was in the Boy Scouts. And we actually went to a church service once, and it was like my very first experience of a church service.
What were you thinking when you were there?
Well, it was, I can't remember whether it was Catholic or Anglican or anything like that, but it was like really old school. So I think at that age, I just thought it was really, really boring. Right. But which will compare and contrast with my actual conversion when I did become religious. But yeah, I grew up not believing in God. Like, we didn't have discussions about it or anything like that. Okay. As a kid, I didn't know what to think about it. I do remember as a small kid, I used to always wake up before everybody else, like 6 o'clock in the morning sort of thing. And I'd go into the living room and turn the TV on. And on a Sunday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, Kenneth Copeland would be on TV. And he fascinated me because, I mean, obviously I didn't understand anything he was talking about. I didn't understand prosperity preaching and all that garbage.
Well, hang on. But, who you kind of faded out on us for a second.
Oh, okay.
Who was it that you watched on there?
Oh, sorry, Kenneth Copeland.
Oh, Kenneth. Okay.
Yeah, and the one thing you've got to say about Kenneth Copeland is he's a showman. I think that's why he does so well in his grift, is because he's a very good showman.
Indeed, yeah.
But I found that kind of fascinating, but I didn't understand a word he was saying, and that was without him speaking in tongues.
Right, but, I was just going to say that.
Anyway, so I grew up in my mother was, as I say, she was an atheist, but her father was Jewish. And their family all managed to escape the Holocaust.
Wow.
During World War II. My grandfather ended up coming to Australia too, because he could see the writing on the wall. He came before the war started.
Right.
And then one of his brothers ended up in Mexico because they were trying to get into the United States, and the US wouldn't let them in, so they ended up staying in Mexico.
Okay.
And then another brother stayed in Europe and managed to keep safe because they were a pretty wealthy family. So I did have sort of like the cultural Judaism growing up. It wasn't a religious thing at all, but my mother did like to keep some of the customs.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I grew up in that. And I mean, religion to me as a kid was music. I just loved music. I grew up watching a show that was on every weekend here on ABC television called Countdown. which played clips and live performances in the studio and that sort of thing. And I just fell in love with music at a very young age.
Is that a Jimi Hendrix album cover behind you?
Where? Up there?
Yeah.
No, it's actually from the Harmonia Macrocosmica from the 1700s.
Oh, geez, it looks like a Hendrix album.
Yeah, it's not an original, but it's a reprint, obviously. But it's like the phases of the moon. I have plenty of Hendrix in my collection, though. If anyone's interested in my music collection, I believe Neil has linked it down below.
I have, yes,
my Discogs collection.
Your YouTube channel as well, and your not your Facebook,
Twitter handle, yeah. So yeah, I grew up non-religious. When I started university, in my second year of university, I met the girl who ended up becoming my first wife. I've been married twice, and she is Jewish. So when we got married, I converted to progressive Judaism. I didn't.
Wow.
We weren't really believers, though. It was very much, again, a cultural thing. It was just so I could get married in the temple, sort of thing, you know.
Right. Like my family was very much like that too. Although they did go to a lot of services, like on high holidays and stuff like that. But
yeah, we did that. But I always thought this was a funny story. We'd go to like the Yom Kippur service.
Yeah.
But then we'd leave for lunch.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to fast, for people who don't know, you're supposed to fast all day on Yom Kippur. And we used to leave and go and have lunch, and then we'd come back later in the day and have a bit more of the service. So that shows how devout we were.
Yeah.
But yeah, we never talked about religion, you know. It was just kind of assumed. And it was very much, again, a cultural thing. Like we'd have a Seder at Pesach and, you know, and that sort of thing. But it was never, it wasn't a real thing as far as actual religious belief went.
Right.
And then we ended up, we divorced after a few years because we were very young, and I went through my first bout of depression, which is something that's sort of been a thing that I've had to deal with throughout most of my life.
Oh, wow. Sorry, man.
No, it's all right. Oh, hey, X, I didn't see you were in the chat. Yeah, that kind of, the marriage fell apart, which, you know, it's just one of those things that happens. And not long after, I met the girl who would end up being my second wife. Like, we didn't end up in a relationship for a while, but I met her at the first time. And then I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time, and I just wistfully said to him, I wish I could just pack it all in and bugger off to the States for a while. And he looked at me in all seriousness and said, "What's stopping you?"
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, you're right. So I ended up selling like 90% of my worldly possessions, and I ended up bumming around the States for about 3.5 months. And when I came back, this woman who ended up being my second wife, she was still there. She met me at the airport. We, at that stage, really started a relationship. And she and her family were going to a Pentecostal church.
Ooh.
And so she asked me if I would go to church with her one day. And I went to the service. And the first time I heard people in the Pentecostal church speaking in tongues, I was like, what the fuck is this? I had no idea, you know, but I kept going, you know, just, you know, I thought I was being nice.
Appease her, care.
Yes. But then I think I was still going through a lot of the depression and that sort of thing. And I noticed the community that was there. And then I just started to listen to what the preachers were saying. And I thought, you know what? I really want this. And I really started to fall for it. I really started to fall into it, I should say. They weren't deliberately trying to con me. They were just having their service. But it was speaking to my depression-addled brain at the time. And I went up and made the altar call at the age of about 26, 27, something like that. And that was the first time I was ever properly religious. And the funny thing is, after being sort of, what the fuck about the speaking in tongues the first time I went, when I went up and made the altar call, they prayed over me and that sort of thing. And then they prayed for me to, speak in tongues. And I did. And I wasn't putting it on. I wasn't bunging it on. It just happened. It was the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. But after that, so after I converted, we got married, probably about 6 months later, something like that. And I really got heavily involved in the church. I started, because I'm not like you, Neil, like I'm not a professional musician, but I do play a little bit of guitar and that sort of thing. And so I started being involved with the praise and worship at the church.
I wouldn't call me a professional either.
Fair enough. I'm one of those. I'm one of those musicians who's like, jack of all trades and a master of none. Like I can play a little bit of a few things. In fact, one of the best things about going to this church was that I learned to play drums there. Because they needed a spare drummer, if their drummer couldn't make it every week. So they said to me, why don't you sit behind the drum kit and see how you go? And I managed to pick it up fairly quickly. So that was a good thing, I learned how to play drums there. And I still play a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But
right
I started getting yeah, I'm a bit far away.
That's true.
So I started.
Hell of a commute.
I started. Yeah, be a hell of a commute, and we're not allowed to leave the country at the moment in Australia. They've actually barred people from leaving the country because of COVID.
Right.
So I started getting involved with the praise and worship, and eventually I was leading the praise and worship. I was the guy out the front singing the songs, playing the guitar. Even wrote a few praise and worship songs for our church, the whole bit. I was in. I was fully in.
Wow.
It wasn't an act. I was fully in. And
you ended up getting convinced, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. To the point where we actually had like I'd grown up with a very good scientific understanding and all that sort of thing. And then we had one night at our church a presentation from, I don't know if it was Answers in Genesis itself, but it was something like that. It might have been Creation Ministries International. It was one of those. I know they both originally started here in Australia anyway.
Yeah.
But, sorry. They had a presentation about creation science, as they call it. No, absolutely. But I was so committed to believing, what I'd been taught in the church, in the sermons and all that sort of thing, that I really tried hard in my head to square that circle.
Mm-hmm.
And tried to say, okay. And so I'd start to read the magazines that they'd put out and try and see, actually, they do have, I never actually investigated it the way someone like, say, Paul Agia does.
Right.
I just tried to make it work in my own head because I felt like I needed to. So for about 6-7 years, I was fully into this church. And yeah, I really believed it in my heart. I thought that, Jesus and God were the answer. And one of the things I should probably point out is one of the things I've always dealt with as starting in my early childhood and probably still deal with today is like an existential fear of death. Like just the idea that my consciousness will cease to exist has always bothered me really, really badly. And so I think when I got religion, I felt like, oh, that's good. I now know that my consciousness will go on, because it'll go to heaven or whatever.
You never questioned how that could happen?
No, I just sort of kind of assumed that somehow there was something in my head that wasn't, made up of molecules or matter or whatever.
Well, what would it be made of? Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, I can look at it now and think how ridiculous that was, but it made sense at the time and it comforted me at the time. Right. I still tell people, I have such an existential threat, a fear of death, that I've actually told people I would rather go to hell than cease to exist.
Wow.
That's how much I fear the non-existence thing. I understand now what a irrational fear that is, but it's still there.
I think lots of people still have that kind of a fear. I mean, I know I don't want to exist, but
yeah,
on the other side of that coin, I realize that I'm not even going to know, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I'll go in my sleep most likely, and then I'll never wake up, and I won't even ever know.
Yeah. Anyway, the year from hell then hit me, and that was 2002. That year, earlier, just before that year, in December of 2001, was one of the greatest joys of my life, and that was my son being born. And he's still here with me, and he's up in his room trying to be as quiet as possible while I'm doing the show, which is very sweet of him.
How old is he?
He's just turned 19.
Oh, okay.
He's just finished his first year of university. He's doing a drama degree.
Nice.
Yeah. So he was born, but then early in the new year in 2002, you know how some women have postnatal or postpartum depression?
Yep.
Well, my wife went through postpartum psychosis.
Oh.
It was terrible. And she was sick with that on and off for about 2 years.
Wow.
So yes, yeah, she was in and out of hospital at the time, and she had a good psychiatrist and that sort of thing, which was really helpful. But I ended up finding myself basically being a single father to a newborn, and I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, it's a minor, if you believe in miracles, it's a minor miracle he's still alive, because I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, they are. And so that happened. And then later in the year, on my 31st birthday, my mother died. She was only 58 years old, and she'd had breast cancer for about 3 years. And then about 2 months after that, my niece up in Toowoomba got wiped out by a semi-trailer and died.
Oh, man.
So, as you can imagine, that makes you do a lot of questioning.
Yeah, sure.
When all of this stuff happens all at once. And it didn't help. It did not help. One of the first things that started making me question my faith wasn't even necessarily what had happened to my wife or what had happened to my mother. It was the first church service we went to after my mother had died. And it was a small church, only probably about 50, 60 people used to go to a service every Sunday. So everybody knew everyone, and everybody knew what had happened.
Right.
And one woman came up to me in the church service who was considered to be a prophet in our church. Like, she had words of prophecy that people took seriously.
Sure she did.
Yeah, of course. But and she came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm sure your mother gave her heart to the Lord before she passed."
Oh.
And I knew my mother. If Jesus Christ had bodily, physically appeared in front of her, she would have given him a whole mouthful of 4-letter words and told him where to go. That's the sort of person my mother was.
Yeah.
You know? So I knew that this did not happen. I knew my mother had not. So that was a real problem for me. As a Christian, I thought, oh my God, my mother is burning in hell.
Mm-hmm. But your mom came from a Jewish lineage, correct?
Yes, that's right. She was.
Jews don't believe in hell, so.
No, exactly. But I did. So, you know. In fact, one of the things, as I said, my mother was not a religious person, even though she grew up Jewish, but she did ask me to say the mourner's Kaddish for her on the anniversary of her passing every year.
Yeah, that's more of a tradition thing too, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, that was the beginning of me questioning. As I say, my wife was ill for about 2 years after my son was born, in and out of hospital. And so for the first 2 years of his life, I was basically raising him on my own. And then finally she seemed to be over the worst of it. And my psyche kind of went, okay, that crisis is over. Time for you to have a nervous breakdown now.
Well, 2 years of running the show on your own, you could only understand why your brain went, my turn.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up being in and out of hospital for about a year or so, and that put a great strain on the marriage, and I think you all know the rest.
I find it odd that her being in and out didn't do that, but when you were in there, it did that.
You know, this kind of happened in both relationships where they went through some problems and I was there to help them through it. And then when I went through problems, it caused the marriage to fail.
Wow.
I don't know. We're still good friends. We're still on speaking terms. In fact, you know, we know that it wasn't because we hated each other that we broke up. It was just circumstances. And, you know, I still care about her. I still love her, you know, but she's still trapped in religion, and that's, you know, but I would never try and deconvert her. That's not my place.
Sure.
You know, we've had discussions about this sort of thing, and it's like, you know, I'll respect your beliefs and you respect mine. And that works fine, you know. I don't think we need to be out there trying to, I mean, this is just my personal thing. I don't think we need to be out there actively deconverting people. My personal thing is, if people come up to me and ask why I'm an atheist, I'll tell them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to say to them, "Oh, I'm an atheist, and this is why you should be too." You know, I think that's a little obnoxious. But again,
it's using their tactics. However,
yeah,
could possibly get them to think a little bit about what they believe.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Sure.
But anyway, it took me probably 4 or 5 years to fully get out of the religion. It wasn't an instant snap of the fingers thing.
Right, right.
It was a really long time for me to finally, because I really didn't want to give it up, you know, because it was that security blanket for me, that idea that, you know, oh, I'll be going to heaven when I die and that sort of thing. And I didn't want to give that up. I tried going to other churches, and I tried, you know, being one of those believers who just does it at home sort of thing. And then finally, I know people have mixed opinions of these people, but I read Dawkins and I read Hitchens. And I mean, Dawkins, don't get me started on what he is like as a human being, because his latest transphobic stuff is really, that's my shirt today is protect trans kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with what's going on over in England right now.
Yeah. And more on that in a little. But so I read God Delusion and I read God Is Not Great, and those books were very, very helpful to me.
Yeah, I have both of them myself.
In you know, I don't know if I'd ever need to read them again, but I think reading them was very helpful at the time, that I was finally saying to myself, okay, I not only, you know, don't I believe this, but it's impossible to believe this.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, after you know a lot of things like of the stuff that you read, and there's many other books that also help with that. Like Aaron Ra's book or Jackson Wheat's book, which I'm just, you know, I've got a good chunk read into that one already now, and it's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, and these books literally tell you what reality is all about, in other words.
Yeah, they're both fabulous science communicators.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, that whole Aaron Ra series that he did on the phylogenies, going all the way from the beginning right up to human beings, that was fabulous.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that. Couldn't wait for every episode to come out. But yeah, I read Dawkins and I read Hitchens, and I finally was, for the first time, you know, before I believed in God, I didn't really have the concept in my head of atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't really know what it was. But after I read Dawkins and Hitchens, it was like, okay, that's what I am. I am an atheist.
Okay.
And it was like, you know, I don't believe in God. It was as simple as that. And, you know, it wasn't that I just gave up on Christianity. I did think about other religions, but I'd done some research on them before I'd become a Christian. You know, because I'm a big Beatles fan, so I thought about Hinduism and all that sort of thing, you know, because of George Harrison and all that sort of thing. I dabbled a little bit as a teenager with tarot cards too.
I still have some.
Yeah. Oh, they're beautiful. My son's got some too. And all that sort of thing. But it was just really the realization that actually, no, I don't think there is a God at all. And then it was a progression from there, you know, because to be a Christian, especially a Pentecostal Christian, an evangelical Christian, you kind of get trapped not just in the religion, but you get trapped in the sort of right-wing politics that go with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the whole right to life thing, which only seems to extend until they're actually born, and then, whoop, you're on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now we don't care.
Yeah. And you know, a whole anti-LGBT thing and all that. So it took me a little while to evolve those views as well, and realize, no, you know, that's terrible. We need to support people. We need to support LGBT people, and we need to, you know, I found myself going further and further and further left wing. I haven't quite got as far as Felicia has in becoming an anarchist, but I do watch some of those people on YouTube and that sort of thing, and I find the views interesting, even if I'm not quite there yet. But then it was so important to me that I made this evolution in myself, and ever since then, I think what I've just tried to do is be a little bit of a better person every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all there is to it. And I'm so glad I made that journey, because 3 years ago, my son came and he gave me a USB stick and said, "I'm going over to a friend's place. I want you to read what's on this stick when I'm gone." And so I took him over to his friend's place. I came home, I put the USB stick in the computer, and he'd written me this several-page letter where he told me he was transgender and that he wanted to use he, him pronouns, and he told me what his new name was and all that sort of thing. And so, I'm so glad that I had made this, I'd gotten out of religion and I'd thrown off the sort of right-wing anti-LGBT politics that go with it, because now I could be there for him when he needed me. So, that was very, very important.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that's what I meant when I said we'd come back to the LGBT or the trans issue, because,
I kind of figured.
The last 3 years have been, his journey and me being there to help him with that.
Which is great, because not a lot of kids have parents like you, by the way.
Yeah, I've come to realize that.
Yeah, and so someone in the chat was asking what was going on in England. In England, they've decided now to deny transgender kids the proper medications that they require for HRT and stuff like that.
In particular, what they've done is they've stopped them getting easy access to puberty blockers.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
they're not allowing them out now or something like that. So
yeah, which are really important. My son had to use those for a little while, even though he was 16 when he came out to me. He still needed to use the puberty blockers for a bit before he could go on the testosterone.
Right.
But, for the kids who know, and I'll tell you now, anybody who might question otherwise, kids, they know who they are. Absolutely. Yeah. If a kid comes up to you and tells you that they're trans, or that they're, really a boy or really a girl or really non-binary or whatever, believe them.
Yep.
Because they know themselves. They really do. And those puberty blockers are so important. And it's so sad to see in the UK, where they actually did have very reasonably progressive laws as far as trans people are concerned, to see it starting to get rolled back.
Yeah.
It breaks your heart.
It's, in my opinion, it's cruelty. It's taking away a basic. Now, once again, going to be going through depression and all kinds of shit that they're going to have to deal with at school, at sports, at whatever. And these kids are now going to have to be dealing with being picked on, being humiliated in front of their peers, in front of anyone else. And it's heartbreaking. And for me, it's angering. I think about it, and I literally start to boil inside. I start getting irate because it's fucking bullshit.
Absolutely it is. And it makes me really angry too, as you can imagine, as a parent of a trans kid.
Of a trans kid, yeah.
And just so everybody knows too, by the way, my son's mother who is, as I said, still in the religion, she's actually been very accepting. She found it quite difficult to understand at first, but thankfully, and this is one of the reasons why I still care about her, and we're still really close, is she put her son above what the religious people might have been saying to her.
And Steve's got it, yeah, for sure.
And I give her all the credit in the world for that. Because it's really hard, because her family, my mother's family, my son's mother's family, he's disowned all of them except for her,
right? Because
they are, they're very not accepting.
So they're kind of toxic towards him now.
Oh, they are very toxic. So he's just said, nope, not having anything to do with them. End of story.
Good for him.
And so much so that even my ex, this year she's coming to Christmas with us instead of with her family, because she's had enough of it.
Wow.
So
they're actually letting you guys get together for Christmas?
Yeah, well, we don't have much COVID here in Australia. That's the thing.
Yeah, well, because you guys have been smart about it and not letting people out of the goddamn country.
Well, yes, but also we do have the natural advantage of being an island, and that really does help.
That's true.
Not having any land borders with other countries is huge. I mean, for you Canadians, you have to deal with the fact that you've got a land border with that petri dish that is the United States.
Yes, indeed we do. But our borders have been closed since March. So
yeah,
I mean, only essential, like trucks that have supplies and food and whatever come through, right? So that's it.
Have you been closing?
I couldn't go down if I wanted to.
Have you been closing borders between provinces as well?
For the first few months, they did.
Yeah.
But they kind of lightened up on that a bit, and now it's more. They're asking you not to do any travel unless it's essential.
Yeah.
Like, they're not demanding this, because really, I mean, can you police that? You can't even police that. So they're asking people, to be decent human beings and not do any non-essential travel.
Yeah.
They're asking us not, to for the last little while, we've been under a bit of a lockdown where, you can be with people that are in your immediate social bubbles or family or whatever. And then that's it. And then don't be in groups larger than, like, say 5 or 6 people. And now they narrowed it down. Like, if you live alone or something, you can have like a family member over or 2. And that's it. And wear masks and anywhere indoors now, other than like in your own home, we have to wear masks. It's mandatory. Yeah. And I see people that don't do it in my building, and I fucking freak on these people.
Yeah, fair enough too. Ego in the chat says, but you have dingoes in Australia. Dingoes in Australia are the least of your worries as far as deadly animals are concerned.
Yeah, don't cross.
We've got all sorts of snakes and spiders and crocodiles and.
Although I love the funnel webs down there, man. They're cool looking. They're badass, and they got huge fangs on them, man.
Yeah, but they will kill you.
Well, yeah. If you're a healthy adult, you've got to. If you can get to a hospital and get the anti-venom, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, but I mean, we have a lot of big hairy spiders that won't kill you. That we have huntsman spiders and that sort of thing, and they'll come into your house. And I actually don't mind having the huntsman around, because they eat the cockroaches and that sort of thing, and they help keep the other pests in control.
You can handle huntsmans. They're actually one of the more social species, I guess you could say. So you can actually put your hand out and they will crawl onto your head. I've held huntsmen before. They're pretty cool, and they're curious as fuck too. So they're like jumping spiders, just really big. Well, not really big. They're not quite huge, but they're a decent sized spider.
They can get pretty big. You get the littler ones in the house, but the bigger ones you get outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I love spiders. I'm a big arachnophile, so.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd love it here then.
Oh, probably. I'd be hunting them down. Are you kidding? It's poisonous. Yeah, so what? If you don't fuck around with it, you'll be fine.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that was sort of like the end part of my journey has been, you know, now being there for my son and being able to help him, you know, become who he wants to be. And, you know, that was it. When he came out to me, when he had that letter, I read it. And for about 5 minutes, I was sort of like, you know, stunned because I should have seen it coming and I didn't.
You
can put saddles on those huntsman spiders. Ah.
To battle.
Yes. Da-da-da.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, when he first came out to me, I was sort of really stunned for maybe 5 minutes. And then
did you see signs at all?
In hindsight, absolutely. But you know, when you're in the middle of it and you're seeing this person every single day, it often is, you know, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Sure.
So I can look back now and think, oh, that was a sign, and that was a sign, and that was obvious. How'd you miss that one?
Mm-hmm.
But after that 5 minutes passed, I just sort of, I texted him and I said, I used his name and I said, I'm here for you. What do you need from me? It was as simple as that. But but one thing I did have to learn was that, you know, once he came out to me, I wanted to be a warrior for the trans cause and the trans community and all that sort of thing. You know, you get that fatherly protection kind of thing going on. And it took me a little while to realize that, no, what I actually need to do is I need to sit back, I need to listen, and I need to amplify trans voices rather than being the voice myself. Oh, you're sweet, Eggs. But yeah, you know, it was very important to learn that lesson, is that I don't need to be out there actually being the one saying the things. Let the trans people themselves say the things, and I just need to be there and amplify those voices. So
yeah, your son's lucky because not a lot of kids have understanding and supportive parents like you.
No, I learned that after a little while. You know, to me, it just, because I'd gotten to this point in my journey where, you know, I was accepting of all people and all that sort of thing. To me, it was just obvious that that's what I had to do. Mm-hmm. It, you know, but I realized that it's not obvious for a lot of people. And I went back and I thought about my mother. And my mother, I mean, to be fair, she's been gone for nearly 20 years now. So a lot's changed in our understanding of trans people in the last 18, 20 years. She was a very progressive person, my mother, but she had a blind spot with trans people. Mm-hmm. Because she was like I'd suppose what you'd say is that she came from the sort of medical essentialist kind of idea. You know, that you are what your chromosomes say you are.
Right.
That sort of thing, you know.
Which is true.
Well, yes and no, because
the thing is there's multiple combinations of chromosomes now.
Yes. And not only that, you can have somebody who has XX chromosomes, but they physically present as male, or XY chromosomes and they physically present as female. But happens.
There are multiple ways. Like there's XXYY. They found all kinds of combinations now.
Absolutely. Anybody who tells you that gender is binary, I usually say to them, bitch, please, biological sex isn't binary, much less gender. I mean, gender is...
To me, this is all part of our human evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But, that's the thing, people get, and I think my mother was like this too, is she couldn't separate sex and gender in her head. They were the same thing as far as she was concerned. In fact, she used to say to me, she was an editor by trade. She used to edit textbooks and that sort of thing for the Queensland Department of Education.
Right.
And she used to say to me, people have sex, words have gender. So she couldn't get the idea of sex and gender in her head. And yeah, X again has it right. Gender is the expression, but it's also the identity. There's gender identity and there's gender expression, and they're actually two different things as well. But that's what I say to people. If they say to me that gender is binary, I say to them, biological sex isn't binary, much less gender.
Right.
So
right. It's binary, huh? Then explain, back in the day you could say, then explain hermaphrodites.
Well, yeah.
Right? But I mean, as an example, because they've never really been binary.
No, and we wouldn't use that word anymore either. We'd use intersex instead, thankfully. But and I've known intersex people too, and they're valid. Intersex people are valid, and they are biologically neither male nor female. I mean, they may identify as male or female because, again, that's gender, not sex. So
valid to me, unless you're a complete fucking utter douchebag, horrible human being, then your validity level kind of drops a bit. But
well, yes,
like someone like Hitler, I mean, like you're not so valid. You're a fucking a-hole. But
absolutely,
why would anyone not be valid? Like that just blows me away.
Yes, gender identity is not a choice. Being a fascist is.
Yes. Although, that you may not even be a choice. You may have grown up with it.
Well, that's true too.
That's really most of the things that we believe aren't a choice.
No.
We are either in some form of indoctrinated or we are convinced somehow of whatever it is that we believe.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're choosing to believe it. It's just that's what makes sense to you, so you go with it. It's not really a choice. It's just a mental exercise. Yeah,
but I suppose I would argue in that sense that maybe the ideas are not a choice, but the actual being a fascist is. Deciding to act on those beliefs, that's a choice.
You probably choose to call yourself one.
Yes. But they've just been talking. They've just had a royal commission come out in New Zealand about the Christchurch shooter, and they're talking about how he was radicalized, on the internet and all that sort of thing. But they were also mentioning the fact that there are lots and lots of people who go into those internet forums and say shitty alt-right fascist things, but never act on them. So I think there is a difference between the people who just believe those things and say those things and the people who actually then decide to act upon them.
Yeah, and then they become even worse people when they act upon those types of ideas.
Absolutely. Well, you see what happens with Christchurch shooter. He ends up murdering 50-odd people. So
yeah.
And he was one of us. He wasn't a New Zealander. He was an Australian.
Wow. And
that's really it should be a bigger source of shame for Australians than it actually is.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, obviously something went wrong somewhere in this guy's life, and
there's been some interesting things, but I think there is too much tolerance of that sort of thing in this country. One of the things that came out from reporting on this Royal Commission that came out yesterday was apparently Australia is the only one of the Five Eyes countries. Do you know the Five Eyes countries?
This is the first for me.
It's like 5 countries that share intelligence. It's the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. and they all share like intelligence with each other.
Okay.
And Australia is the only one of those 5 countries that has not listed any extreme right-wing organization as a terrorist organization. And that's disgraceful.
You think they should? Because you guys
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, of course we do. All of those countries do. You know, everywhere does.
And X is taking the blame for this one, so.
Yeah. Partly. It's not all on you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too. If left unchecked, words can become actions. Well, yeah, depends on the words. Yeah, and my friend Dave saw video on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Oh yeah, I knew though they were out there, and I made sure that I did not watch any of the actual footage of it because it was just, I knew it was going to be horrendous. Yeah. And what also was horrendous was how long it took Facebook to take that video down.
Yeah,
because they really had to have their arms twisted to take it down because it was getting so many clicks, and you know, that's just revolting.
Well, that sort of thing, you know, it's, what do they call that? The train wreck effect. Like you'll slow down when you're driving. You know, humans.
Oh yeah, you see that in the traffic all the time.
Morbidly curious about things like that, I suppose. So
that's true, but you know, I just felt I went out of my way not to see that when it happened because it was just, I knew that it would be just so
disturbing and heartbreaking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow. You know, I think most places have had some version of that happen. So
yes. The big difference is that when it happened in Christchurch, they immediately passed gun law reform. When we had the Port Arthur massacre here in Australia in 1996, we immediately passed gun law reform, even though we had a conservative government at the time. Mm-hmm. But they can't do that in America, even though they have one after another of these tragedies. And it's, you know, because I think it's partly because of the Second Amendment, but it's also partly the gun culture is just so ingrained in the United States that even if you could pass, you know, some change to the Second Amendment to make it allowable to have some sort of sensible gun reform. And I'm not saying ban all the guns. I'm saying sensible gun laws.
We have some here in Canada.
Yeah. But if you could, even if you could pass that sort of thing in the United States, the culture will take at least a couple of generations to change.
Yep. Yeah. The unfortunate thing as well is there's such a huge black market underground for weapons like that too. So even if you put restrictions in, and you know, and really it's like personally, I don't think the average Joe that isn't in the military needs an AR-15.
Absolutely not.
Like, I mean, not gonna lie, I'd probably like to have one and have some fun with it too. But like, do I need an automatic fucking assault rifle? Like the word assault rifle is right in there.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And even
it's made for killing people.
Even if you decided you wanted to let people have some access to a weapon like that so that they could go and shoot at the range, leave the weapon at the range. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, I got no problem with that.
Yeah.
But then again, you'll have people who say, well, they could just easily sneak it out of there. Well, not if they have some sort of an alarm system that goes off when that gun leaves the property.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a little harder, but they might be able to learn how to disable that too.
Yeah.
There's always going to be loopholes, right? But the thing is I think if a majority of the people are on the same page about it, then that's less likely to happen.
Yeah.
But that's going to take a lot of work to get people especially down stateside, to think that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, when you pass gun laws, like sensible gun control laws, what you have to do is what we did here as well, is have a massive gun buyback program.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it vastly reduces the amount of weapons that are available to be on the black market in the first place.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's harder in the States because you have land borders, you know, and so weapons can be smuggled from Mexico or Canada or where, you know, that sort of thing. We don't, well, you know, I'm trying to be even-handed there, but
we got some slingshots sticking out.
Yeah. Whereas it's much harder to smuggle
Some
weapons
axes.
into us. Yeah. It's much harder to smuggle weapons into Australia because, you know, we don't share land borders. We're an island. It makes things easier in that respect. So,
Big island. That's why they consider you a continent.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, we don't share a land border with another country, so
yeah, for
makes
sure.
a big difference.
It does. So back to the deconversion stuff.
Yeah, sure.
You said it didn't really happen like that. It was a bit of a long stretch. Can you kind of sum it up a little bit? Like, were there events that happened that led you to start thinking that way? That made you question, should I really be believing this?
I think it was more a case of circumstance, at least at first.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, I started to drift away from the church that I'd been involved with. And I think that was a big deal because I wasn't, you know, with all these people constantly trying to reinforce those beliefs. So it gave me an opportunity to actually think. You know, because 2002 was such a train wreck of a year for me, I stepped back from the church. I wasn't as involved in doing praise and worship and being at every service and all that sort of thing. And then we moved away. So we weren't going to that church. We started going to other churches that we didn't have that community connection with.
Okay.
And so it just gave me time, and it gave me an opportunity. And then when I had my own nervous breakdown, I spent time in hospital and I started talking to people who were LGBTQ, who were not religious people. And, you know, there's really nothing to do in a hospital but sit around. And I was a smoker at the time. To this day, I'm still addicted to nicotine lozenges. But I was a smoker at the time. So we used to sit around this table and just smoke our brains out because there was nothing else to do, you know. And we just talk about anything and everything. And I think being exposed to that sort of range of competing ideas, as opposed to being in my little church community, I think that made a big difference too.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense because it puts a whole different mindset in there when you start talking about stuff.
Absolutely. You all of a sudden, you're not just hearing the same thing from your pastor week in, week out.
Sure.
You're starting to hear a diversity of views, a diversity of philosophies.
Breaking from the echo chamber.
Exactly.
That's good. I mean, I grew up, as you know, like Jewish and stuff like that, but I never really was like fully into it. I still had a God belief, I guess, because I used to try to talk to him and stuff. But
yeah,
I mean, other than that, it wasn't hard for me to let it go. Let's put it that way. You know,
it was definitely difficult for me to let it go, but I'm so much a better person now that I have, and that I've not just from the, I want to make this absolutely clear. It wasn't just the losing the God belief that made me a better person. I had to really, really work at that.
Right.
You know, I do not for a second think that people who don't believe in God are in any way, shape, or form better than people who do. You have to work at that being a better person.
I mean, there's some people that do believe that are better humans, and there's some people that don't believe that are better humans. You're going to get assholes in every fucking...
Yeah, absolutely. The point I'm making, the point I'm trying to make is that to be a better person, you need to work at that. You have to do that hard work yourself.
Yeah, it's about you, you know.
Yeah.
Although our beliefs can have play in that, of course. But
absolutely. But you know, I think it's about exposing yourself to,
sure,
you know, as many ideas and hopefully as many good ideas as you can. Yes. And I think it goes back to that whole idea of trying to, you know, believe as many true things and as few false things as possible.
Yep, absolutely. And our beliefs do inform our actions. So
absolutely. You know,
well, sir.
Yep.
No, go ahead. You had something.
I was just going to say our beliefs can and do change, and sometimes we can have a hand in that. You know, you can't choose what you believe, but you can choose what you expose your mind to.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. Beliefs are usually a matter of being convinced of something rather than choosing. So, yeah. So make sure you expose yourself to, you know, good information, not shitty information. Yeah. Although, how do you tell, really? Sometimes, well, you'll be able to tell. But anyways, well, sir, we have come up to the hour. So, and we still got a bit of an after party to go here. So, and you really only got about another hour or so of time before you.
Yeah, and then I've got to go eat food because I'm diabetic, so I have to make sure I eat regularly.
Right. So, what we'll do is I'm going to take a quick break. I got to pee and whatnot, and I'll have a quick smoke, and I'll come back and I'll give you a brand new link, and we'll get together with some folks. So, any of you guys out there that would like to join Bicyclelegs and myself, let me know via Twitter or Facebook, and I'll get you a link, and you can jump in here with us, and we can carry on the conversation about this and many other interesting things, I'm sure. A couple quick announcements. Thank you. Well, announcements or declarations, really. This one is thanks to all my proving. So you guys kick ass. And my new schedule, as you probably know by now, is Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, as opposed to the original Mondays, Wednesdays. Because I am now a cast member of the Nonprofits, which is one of the ACA shows.
Cool.
So that's what I'll be doing on Wednesdays, is doing the recordings for the Nonprofits. So definitely go over to the Nonprofits channel and check that out, and you'll see me in a couple of the episodes so far. And Randolph and I coming up in the new year, sometime in the new year, hopefully shortly after the new year, weather permitting and whatnot, because we're still putting the place together. We got our own call-in show coming up called True North Talk. Go look that one up on YouTube. You can also find it at TrueNorthTalk.ca, which will lead you to the link right to the YouTube channel. And give us a sub. You won't be disappointed. There's some funny videos up there of Randolph and I being construction boneheads and running around. And even to the Benny Hill music going on there in the background, which is kind of funny. Thanks to Peter DeTucker, who also known as You're Gonna Go For It. He did that one for us, which is really funny. And I think that's about it. But anyways, guys, check out the links below for Bicyclelegs. You can check out his musical tastes on the what is it called? Disc something?
Discogs.
Discogs, yes. There's his Twitter link and also his YouTube channel, which doesn't have any content yet, but I'm sure over time we'll be able to convince him to start putting some shit up.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, like I always say at the end of these things, like the late, great, before I say that, I'm going to say, because of the COVID-19 thing, remember to be well and be safe, and above all, be kind. And like I always say at the end of the interviews, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.